Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. Time for another show. Maybe you recognize the sound profile once again of today's show, or maybe it's completely different. I don't know. We're back downstairs in the usual studio, somewhat less quiet, somewhat less sound-absorbing material around here, so we'll see whether you notice that or whether you find it familiar or whether having moved everything once or twice has changed the sound profile somehow of everything. Anyway, I don't know. But still not over the symptoms just yet, so still, struggling a little bit. But I'm here participating in the struggle with you. The struggle is real. The struggle is mine. Me going around in circles. I think I'm experiencing the Paxlovid rebound, as others have experienced before me. Back to testing positive. That's exciting, which of course means that I really should be back upstairs in isolation again. Everybody else is negative. Everybody else is recovered. That's good news. Although the high schooler still has some lingering, I guess, nasal congestion, but still testing negative. So that's good news. Production staff is completely in the clear. I'm the loser that's got the rebound here. So dealing with it. I've arranged to have a doctor come in to today's show, so that's good news, and we can have an examination on air, and of course, recap the State of the Union address, which I watched so closely last night. It's been a long time since I don't think I've made a serious attempt at sitting through the State of the Union in all the time that we've been on the air with the show, quite honestly. It's not my thing. And I take pride in it not being my thing, I guess, to some extent. But by most accounts, that is to say by most normal accounts, an excellent delivery last night, even some highlight reel worthy moments for President Biden, and of course the antics that surrounded him. There was no way that with this makeup of this Republican House in particular, but also among the Senate. I mean, the Senate, they're just as ridiculous in many ways as people in the House. But the House has sort of always been more famous for having more loose cannons. But with Murdery Trader Green in the House, Lauren Boebert still in the House, even if they're not getting along with one another, Paul Gosar, and of course George Santos, well, there was bound to be antics, and they were on display. I don't know what Murdery Trader Green thought she was doing exactly. I understand she showed up in the beginning with a big white balloon, which was supposed to be taking a pot shot about the Chinese spy balloon, which is already like a boring non-story at this point. They've really beat that to death, and there was nothing to it anyway. So she looked a little bit dumb, but she also showed up in costume. I don't know whether the idea of her dressing all in white, but also wearing this weird overcoat with like a faux fur trim of some kind, although, maybe she went out of her way to make sure it was a real fur trim so to own the libs or something. I have no idea. But completely unlike her usual mode of dress, which is the sleeveless garments that she usually goes with. But I don't know. I don't know what that was. I don't know whether she was dressed up as the balloon. Maybe somebody had some interpretation of it. This is not something I was able to glean from the photos, but there's a huge collection of photos. Lots of good camera angles, I guess, still out there, both for the still photographers, which is always the case, and I think for the television camera operators as well. So I've seen about half a dozen different shots of Murdery Trader Green standing and screaming things during the debate. It's not even a debate. It's the State of the Union address. Things certainly went downhill since Joe Wilson got away with standing and yelling. He drew a rebuke. He got censured or reprimanded, I guess, by the House of Representatives afterwards. And now, of course, there's no chance of any of that happening. And that probably prompted a lot more of that behavior, to be honest. I mean, Murdery Trader Green knows very well she's going to get away with whatever she does in there because she's, holding Kevin McCarthy hostage. in all of this. So there's never going to be any punishment. But I would like to know what she thought she was dressing up as. A furry ghost, a sled dog, a cloud. Was she a cloud and the balloon was floating in the cloud? I don't know what she was trying to do. So far, the best treatment I've seen of it is one of the shots of her standing and screaming something, I don't know what, captioned by someone on Mastodon as yelling, "Get me more Dalmatians," which I thought, well, that makes some sense. There's no spots on this coach. He's going to need that. Man, it was really crazy. Mighty OCD has a suggestion. I don't think that's right. His suggestion, it's a morning show. It's not for kids necessarily. And this is, he's using medical terminology. I'll give you a hint about what he's talking about. It's on the KITM hashtag if you'd like to see it. I don't think she was dressed as a polar bear's vulva, but, nor am I couldn't check. I couldn't go with the accuracy for it either, but she was dressed as something. And I'm very curious to know what it was, if only to be able to say, well, that's dumb. You're a very dumb person, and nobody got that. There was also a tweet last night from Burgess Owens, who is, how long has he been around? Is he brand new? I don't even know. Republican of Utah, if I have that correct. And his tweet, which I don't know if it's still up. I screen capped it, one, because I thought that's sure to be deleted at some point, and two, because, of course, it was on Twitter, and I wanted to share it on Mastodon and not really link over there. But at any rate, he had tweeted something about his critique of part of the speech in which President Biden calls for fighting against junk fees, corporate fees, which I think is bound to be a pretty popular thing, by the way. But this enraged them for some reason. And he tweets, "You're saving Americans money through junk fees while eggs are over $18 a dozen? Give me a break, POTUS." And of course, probably most people in America recognize that eggs are not $18 a dozen. And anywhere, no matter how even if you're trying to own the libs by talking about, cage-free, organic, laid in outer space eggs, it's not $18 a dozen. I don't know where that number comes from. It could be that he's secretly Jewish and is going with the high on this, but I doubt it. But no one knows where that came from. I don't know what his reaction has been to being, I'm sure, rebuked. I figure maybe if he's talking about Veruca salt and the golden eggs from the Wonka factory, I don't know how much they go for. Maybe 18 a dozen, but he's super in touch with the regular folk there. So I don't know. Greg is here. Let's welcome him in. Let's find out what actually happened from somebody who might have watched the speech.
Well,
Good morning,
a hen laying egg will cost you $18.
That could be right, and
that's what it costs, unless it costs more. I mean, if you have a high layer, then maybe 25, 30.
Could be. I really have no idea where that came from. I went
but if
and
you
checked
have your average
everything I
working
could
class
find.
egg laying hen, it's $18.
Could be, and right, and like as I said,
and in 2 weeks you'll have a dozen.
If they're devout Jewish hens, you might go to 36. You never know. It could have been the hen's bat mitzvah.
Well,
I don't
look,
know what was going on.
If they were devout Jewish hens, then you'd have two of them.
That's probably
right.
True.
You'd have that one, and then you'd have that other one there that I wouldn't go near.
And remember to collect your eggs before sundown on Friday, because there won't be any on Saturday.
Yeah. Well.
All right.
So that was quite a speech.
Yeah. Did it go well?
Yeah. The FAFO speech that you don't usually watch, you should have watched.
Okay. Well,
I know you hate them. I know you think they're boring. This was anything but boring.
Okay. Well, that's.
You remember
news.
that nice fellow over in England who dresses funny and says "order, order"? It was like that.
Oh,
it was like question time for the prime minister.
Oh, just from screaming?
With the other side shouting out questions and Biden deftly handling them.
Actual
and
questions.
Just amusingly taking them to task. It was great. And, if you didn't have time for the full hour and a half speech.
I did not.
I sent you the 4-minute version. And if that wasn't enough, I sent you the 2-minute version.
Well, $18 for that version.
Well, yeah, I charged you a lot of money, but, it was junk fees.
Okay.
So you don't have to pay them.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, well, that actually did sound like a pretty good idea. And, something people might actually say, hey, that's not a bad thing at all. It's a good thought. Get rid of those
Right.
super
So
fees.
listen,
Real people will
Playbook,
like that.
which
Yes.
is often totally Republican slanted, just had a wonderful version today. I was quite surprised.
All right.
It seemed to be like totally honest. Credit to Ryan Lizza, Eugene Daniels, Rachel Bate, who wrote it. Biden's No Compromise State of the Union, it's called. That's what I meant about FAFO.
Mm-hmm.
So they say, why the White House is celebrating this morning. President Joe Biden had a few goals last night, remind his audience of his accomplishments over the last 2 years,
Yes,
reiterate his positions in the spending debate, no negotiations over the debt ceiling, no touching Social Security, Medicare. Of course, that was a big part of the speech, getting the Republicans to agree to that. Detailed the most popular highlights of his 2023 agenda, and 4, expose his congressional GOP opposition as unreasonable and chaotic. The speech accomplished the first 3 goals, of course, but it will be best remembered for the dramatic clashes with jeering members of the GOP, which may have done more than Biden ever could have hoped to accomplish goal number 4. Expose his congressional GOP opposition as unreasonable and chaotic, if you can't remember, because it was just a few minutes ago.
Yes.
So,
Who are you?
He did a great job there. Republicans put the spotlight on themselves through extraordinary rudeness, John Harris wrote. With boos, taunts, groans, and sarcastic chortles, the opposition party effectively turned themselves into primetime props for Joe Biden.
Huh. Well, I did hear a lot about that, and I also heard in advance from Joan that Kevin McCarthy was laboring mightily to tamp down on this and to try to get them not to do these things. So another battle lost by the speaker, the ghost speaker that we've got.
Yes, covered in the very next paragraph, as a matter of fact.
Well,
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy had warned his colleagues ahead of the speech to behave, but they ignored him, and the new speaker had to resort to shushing them repeatedly from the rostrum.
All right. I should have just left well enough alone.
Right. Meanwhile, Joan was right. West Wing aides, try saying that 3 times fast. West Wing aides cheered and high-fived each other as Biden engaged Republicans who were triggered by his accusation that some in the GOP want to cut Medicare and Social Security. He was, of course, by the way, as a parenthetical, was talking about Rick Scott.
Yeah, that bald
had
guy.
that as part of his written plan. And when Marjorie Taylor Greene yelled, "You lie," and she's obviously talking about Rick Scott.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
She thought she was talking about Biden, but she's talking about Rick Scott. And Mike Lee did one of these, oh, my God, I can't believe you said that, when, in fact, there's tape of Mike Lee running for Congress, running for Senate, I think, in 2010, specifically saying, I'm running in order to get rid of Medicare and Social Security, pull it out by the roots.
Oh, yeah.
People tell me it's dangerous, but I'm telling you, if I didn't want to do this, I wouldn't be running. What would be the point of running if I didn't want to get rid of these programs?
Doing other things.
I mean, that's on tape.
All right.
It's
yeah,
on
that's
video.
a bad
They played
tape.
it on Morning Joe this morning.
Okay.
Right? So
he's a great guy.
They're crazy.
Yes, and or forgetful.
Well, yes. or sincerely mistaken.
Yes. Right, all those things.
Loyal opposition
in
made
good
a
faith, they're
mistake.
negotiating.
People make sincere mistakes from time to time. I made one on Twitter this morning.
Oh?
No, you
didn't.
Dave Darmerfeld is a very good political scientist who follows Kamala Harris very closely. Said in a tweet, other than the president, VP, they had their best spokesman on. And I misinterpreted the tweet and said, who? And people said, I'm being very disrespectful to the VP. I said, I didn't know he meant the VP. I thought he said, other than the president and the VP, they had their best spokesperson on. Who?
Yeah, I don't. Right.
Not who, sarcastically, who is Kamala Harris? Like who? Who did they mean?
Yeah. Well, who did he mean?
That was quickly, settled. But my point is, you can make an honest mistake, but this wasn't an honest mistake. And what Playbook did was note the context here. A different time. The last 2 Democratic presidents to speak before Congress at the halfway point of their first terms had been thoroughly rejected by voters. Bill Clinton lost both houses of Congress in '94. Barack Obama came before Congress having lost 63 seats. But Biden sounded nothing like his Democratic predecessors, who were at times apologetic about the ambitious agenda of their first 2 years. Yeah, Biden promised to present a budget that will cut the deficit by $2 trillion, but he certainly didn't signal a pivot to austerity. He betrayed no regrets. He said, let's finish the job. And this is somewhat counterintuitive because by some measures, and they go into the things that obsess political reporters in a really stupid way, and I'm glad they cover it here, because by some measures, Biden is weaker politically than Clinton and Obama were. Clinton had 50% approval. Obama's was 47. Biden's is at 42 by some measures.
Okay.
Depends which polls you look at. The pre-speech coverage on the cable nets was heavy on the dismal polling, including evidence that most Democrats are unexcited for him to run for re-election. But Biden's grand insight is that you're only as unpopular as your enemies, and their ideas are popular. So McCarthy can run a replay in 95 and 2011 and assume government spending was the core issue. The White House isn't conceding that point. In fact, Biden and his closest advisors believe he won the midterms on the strength of his big spending. It's a different time, and we feel very strongly about what we got done as a basis for what comes next. In 94 and 2010, we got slaughtered in the midterms. In 22, we lost the House, but we gained a Senate seat. He's not a leader of a party that lost.
That's a fair interpretation.
It's a fair interpretation. For the first time, people say, oh, my God, how can Joe Biden possibly think he has any power in Washington, which everybody knows is a Republican town, because the Republicans took the House but lost in the Senate. And now Kevin McCarthy is Speaker. Look at him stand behind the president like that, as if he's not, as you pointed out, a ghost speaker with almost no power who can't even control people in the chamber. He's like the school teacher who's lost control of the classroom.
Yeah.
It's absolutely what it is. And the idea that, no, we have to concede that Republicans have all the power in Washington now, which is the entire slant of Washington media, which is what gets me so annoyed,
yes,
is wrong. It's just flat out wrong, and they go ahead and they say so here.
That is great. There's some. I love the fact that they're recognizing this.
Yeah, even more. A senior Senate Republican staffer who recently left the chamber echoed the point in a late-night note. In 2011, Republicans had just come off an election where we won 60-plus seats. That gave Boehner and Republicans some real leverage. Today, it's not a top-of-mind issue for the American people, so that gives ours almost no leverage today. And not only do they have little leverage, they don't even know what they want.
All right.
Right?
Well.
And so what about Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Nothing.
Good. Yeah, I wouldn't imagine I didn't think she was going to get a great deal of attention for her response, but she also did not do a particularly good job mirroring the actual tenor of the speech in any way, except to add more jeering and screaming. Which
right.
was,
so here's the bottom line.
As I understand
that they write.
Yes.
It might not be good enough to boost his approval rating out of the 40s, but it could be enough to win another election against the current version of the GOP. I ask you, what's more important, his approval ratings or winning the election? Let's get real.
Well, true. I'll go with winning the election
I'll
myself.
go with winning
How about
the
you?
election as well.
Yeah, all right.
Which, by the way, he just did. And then he did before that. And it doesn't really matter whether or not people are super enthusiastic about having Joe Biden be president again. I'm not super enthusiastic about it. As many of the voters who you could ask would say, I'd prefer somebody younger. But you know what? If you're going to run against Donald Trump, I'm voting for Biden. End story. What else do you want to ask?
I don't know. I don't know.
What
Give
if
me
he
some
runs
time.
against Ron DeSantis? Well, he might, because I think that Biden is probably not going to be running against Donald Trump. I'm not sure it's going to be DeSantis, but I think Trump and DeSantis are going to take each other out. By the way, did you see that Trump yesterday was spending the day calling DeSantis a pedophile and a groomer?
No, I missed that. How could I? I'm so upset that I did. What? I mean, it's not likely any more true than when they call anyone else that, but goodness, that's odd. That's
well,
supposed
what you
to
can
own
look
the
forward
libs.
to.
Good. Well, I'm for it. I mean,
the point is,
I think that they
Trump
should respond
takes
in
along
kind.
with him some segment of the Republican voting population.
Yeah.
And if you remove the segment that he controls, then whoever is left has less votes.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the point. That's the only point. It's a zero-sum game, and good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Hope he leaves the party and runs third party. That'd be great. Bull Moose Party.
Yeah, and or if it would make any help, fourth, fifth party, whatever it takes. But this is good news. I was pleased to see not exactly the most accurate headline, but it was a bad day for things like that for Trump. But I happened to see somebody covering the it's really a defamation lawsuit, E. Jean Carroll's suit against him for defaming her after denying her accusation of rape, but being referred to in headlines in the newspapers as the Donald Trump rape trial, which I thought was pretty astonishing. And frankly wrong, but, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. So it was a bad day for him. That's good news. Great day for President Biden. And Republicans did everything they could to shoot themselves in as many feet as they could gather.
Speaking of more than 1 foot, so the second most talked about discussion, according to Politico's playbook, which I think is correct here, is Mitt Romney versus George Santos.
Yes. What the hell? How did they even cross paths?
Aside from Biden's confrontation with the entire House GOP, the second most talked about was George Santos and Mitt Romney. Romney last night told Santos how he really felt about him. I don't think he ought to be in Congress, and he shouldn't be in the aisle trying to shake the hand of the president, Romney said afterwards.
Is that what he was doing? Okay.
And there's a video of Romney and Santos just sort of like passing in the aisles there. And Romney turns to Santos and says, "You don't belong here."
Well, he's
and Santos said something to the effect of "Don't be an ass" to Romney, or Romney said to Santos, "Don't be an ass." And Santos said, "You're the asshole." That's how the exchange went, according to people who overheard it.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable.
It is. Just that there was a conversation.
It's not on the floor, so you can't censure him or ask that the remarks be stricken.
That's true, too. And they're from different chambers. But it's a remarkable thing to get Mitt Romney to say ass. That's something. But so okay.
So, that was George Santos' version, and people right away said that couldn't possibly be the case because Mitt Romney would never say ass.
That's a good point,
He might have
too.
said you're a donkey. He might have.
He's a serious serial liar. I don't know why we would take his version of events at face value.
Yeah, right.
Except that it's entertaining.
This is ridiculous. How can George Santos not belong there? First of all, he was Mitt Romney's running mate, and second of all, he was the architect of the building.
Yeah, sure, right. There's nowhere that George Santos doesn't belong.
Right. So
interesting. I was wondering what he was doing that he would even cross paths, but so he was trying to get a handshake from the president as he went down the center aisle. Frequent thing. It does happen even today. I mean, it used to be fairly common even across the aisle, but these Republicans tend to turn their back on Democrats while they're making the speeches, et cetera. So it's surprising, but I guess George Santos will take anything he can get.
Right. Huh. So here is just thoroughly delightful to close this out for the first segment here.
All right.
From Jennifer Bendery, reporter who was got pictures and a commentary about Biden and what he was doing last night.
Here's
and
the photo.
It's just marvelous. It's just great color, but it also, completely captures the mood of Biden and the Democrats there in the chambers, in the chamber, however you refer to it.
Yes.
The State of the Union right now is Bono kicking it with Paul Pelosi. Why was Bono there? Because they mentioned PEPFAR.
Uh-huh. Oh.
Few things in life you can count on, but one of them is Representative Sheila Jackson Lee holding on to her spot on the aisle for the State of the Union. She's had this seat on lockdown for decades.
Yeah, she goes hours ahead of time to get it very often. Or maybe they hold it for her.
They should probably hold it for her at this point.
Just put a little name plaque on it. But she used to head over there 6 hours ahead of time to get it.
Yeah, just to make sure she got her aisle seat.
Good.
So Biden says to McCarthy during the opening remarks, congratulations on being Speaker. And then he says, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you, which actually made McCarthy laugh.
Yes, a nice chuckle. That was very pleasant.
Which is good, because usually during the speech, McCarthy would sit there with a stone face. He wouldn't clap. He wouldn't stand. And, it was remarkable because it was like, we're for mom and apple pie and America is great. And he wouldn't clap and he wouldn't stand. It was just amazing. And she captures that, Jennifer Bendery does. She says here, Biden, 2 years ago, our democracy faced its greatest threat since the Civil War. Today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbound and unbroken. And you could see behind him MVP Kamala Harris standing up and clapping. Kevin McCarthy doesn't stand up to clap.
Yes, well, I guess
she
Kamala
does
Harris.
Rosa DeLauro with her purple hair and funky glasses, having the time of her life. And then there's another one here. We pay for these investments in our future by finally making the wealthiest and the biggest corporations pay to begin their fair share. Everybody's clapping except Lauren Boebert, who's just staring straight at. She's got a great capture of Marjorie Taylor Greene dressed as Cruella DeVille.
Yeah, what is that?
With a faux fox stole. Instead of making the wealthy pay for their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. That's him quoting Rick Scott. Lots of boos, and Marjorie Taylor Greene shouts back, liar.
Okay. Do we ever hear what the coat is about? Do you know?
No. Any more than we know why Kirsten Sinema was wearing a yellow balloon.
Oh. Wow. Well, I didn't see that one yet. Okay.
We're not going to be
she's
moving to being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond, Biden says. Camera pans to Mike Lee looking outraged for some reason. We talked about Mike Lee's comments and why that's ridiculous.
Okay.
And for all their faux outrage tonight on the topic, it's easy to find stories showing some Republicans are calling for cuts to Medicare and Social Security.
Yeah. Okay. It's all over the place.
And, here's your picture of Kirsten Sinema and how she was dressed. She was very easy to spot.
All right. Maybe that was the idea. Wow. That's some set of sleeves there.
Right.
Well, she's got a fashion thing, like Rosa DeLauro.
Okay, so the thing that was most remarkable is she also captured what it was like afterwards. Biden's speech over, he's making the rounds of handshakes with lawmakers in the crowd, and I think it was Jen Psaki who said, good luck to the staffers trying to get Biden out of there. He made Sarah Huckabee Sanders wait like an extra 45 to 90 minutes before she could give her speech, which nobody watched.
Well, that's probably a good plan. If he didn't plan it, he should have. If he did plan it, it's brilliant. And,
I got more comments about the afters after because it's just like so Joe Biden.
There's a lot to this, it turns out. And wow, what a color on that dress for Kirsten Sinema. Okay, well, it's a thing we watch from year to year.
It's very yellow.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Sounds like the wacky clothing segment of the State of the Union coverage is over.
Right. This is Dylan McLemore, who's been on ESPN and does academic research on media, who writes, after the State of the Union, President Biden worked the room as only he can, delaying the GOP response as viewers tuned out. Not the first time it paid off. In competing town halls replacing the second 2020 debate, Biden similarly scored points by sticking around and owning airtime.
It's a habit.
You work the cameras because you're an experienced politician, and besides the fact that you love it, this is like doing well by doing good.
Yeah, and delaying the bad from coming on too. Well,
so that people get bored and won't watch. So with
like
Biden mic'd up and on camera post-speech, Jennifer Bendery writes, it's been remarkable to watch how many members are asking him for help with things as they greet him. And that was part of the State of the Union, which was so effective because he said, look, we did infrastructure and infrastructure is great. And even for you Republicans who didn't vote for it, we're doing infrastructure for you too, because I'm president for everybody. And by the way, I'll be there for the openings and the groundbreakers. reminding them that you can smile and vote against it, and then you can smile and say, look at all the money I brought from my district. And Biden said, and I'm going to be right there next to you, reminding people where the money came from. He did that with Mitch McConnell and the Kentucky Bridge. And he will do it. He will. He'll go to these places.
Yeah,
go to these obscure places and say, look, you know that traffic light you've been asking for 20 years you just got? I did that.
Yeah, right. Put that sticker on it.
Yeah,
they should come. He should go with those stickers, like a roll of those stickers, and put it on every one of those things.
Be everywhere.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, people won't be, some people won't be gracious about it at all, but
I don't think they get it.
It's the right answer to that whole, vote no and take the dough thing is to go and say, if you're going to show up, and you are going to show up at the ribbon cutting because you want credit for it, but I'm going to have to be in the picture. You're going to have to do a lot of photoshopping out there, Republicans. They're going to try and take Biden out of the picture, trying to pose in a way that doesn't look ridiculous without them in it. But the president can put himself in the center of pretty much any photo anytime he wants to. So that's interesting. Good. Well, it's a good fit. He loves doing that. And it's great politically.
Right. So here's Biden spending a good minute talking with Representative Melanie Stansbury and meeting somebody she called the newest member of the team. Such classic Biden, the last guy to leave the party. Mm-hmm. Some guy comes over that Jennifer doesn't know and says something about iron workers and transformational infrastructure. And Biden's response is, by the way, don't tell the guy from West Virginia.
Okay.
And then Marcy Kaptur came over, said something, and she thanked him for something in the speech he's been waiting for 41 years, and then they hugged. And, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee tells Biden, I'm going to run across America with this speech, and then stays for 3 selfies. Then some freshman Democrat comes in and says, here's a picture of my 5-month-old son. Oh, God love you, says Biden. And, does that thing. Representative Jill Takuda, Democrat Hawaii, invites Biden to come to her state. Biden says, are you kidding me? For 8 years, every time I sat down with Barack, he started off every conversation. It's 79 degrees in Hawaii right now.
So
he's
excited
got a remark for everything. This is how you work the room. It's what he's best at. And in this day and age, that kind of retail politics doesn't get the credit it's due. Let me tell you somebody who can't do that, Ron DeSantis.
That's definitely true. He'll be in and out of there. Trump had his own version of it, but it was stilted and awkward. I mean, he can be very personable among his own crowd, but
like most grifters, he can be really charming.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But but there was Biden has the additional skill of being able to be disarming even among the opposition, which is
right. And then he comes over. I mean, he's still going, right?
Wow.
He's like the Energizer Bunny. So then he comes over and he comforts Debbie Dingell about the loss of John Dingell because it was on this date.
Oh.
And then Jennifer Bender, who's chronicling all of this, says, I'm exhausted just watching Biden interact with all these people. The jokes, the stories, the moments of shared grief, the requests for help on various projects. How is he not bawling or passing out on a chair? But he's still going, pepping back up to greet more members of Congress. Now it's Morgan McGarvey, who introduces himself as a Democrat from Kentucky, and Biden comes off with a terrible Kentucky accent.
Okay.
McGarvey says the 4-year-old wanted to know if she could come to the White House Easter egg roll, and Biden said, sure, she can come, with or without you.
All right.
I mean, he's just good at this. And, for people who don't understand how Biden gets elected or got elected or is going to be elected, this is it right here. I'm just telling you. Mm-hmm. And I'm also telling you, Ron DeSantis cannot do this. Simply incapable. Impossible.
Yeah. Even with the boots on.
Right. So he has the advantage of the presidency. He uses it to the best extent. He uses his experience. Yes, he's old, but he's got energy and he uses his experience. And he winds up giving a speech that actually engaged the watching public in a State of the Union, which, as you will be the first to recognize, is nearly impossible, and then winds up occupying the camera long enough to knock Sarah Huckabee Sanders off the front stage.
Nice.
Very, very well done.
Yeah. Remarkable. I see here even lower down in Bendery's chronicling here his interaction with Republican members of Congress as well, who think they're putting him on the spot, and he says, I can help you.
Right. And then she finishes and says Biden spent roughly an hour and 10 minutes in the House chamber after his address was over, which is just about the same amount of time it took for him to give the speech. That's why Jen Psaki said good luck to the aides trying to get him out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tradition for the opposition to give a State of the Union speech 5 minutes after Biden leaves the chamber.
Yeah.
Not 5 minutes after Biden finishes the speech.
Oh, is that right?
5 minutes after Biden leaves the chamber.
Well,
what if you don't leave? Then you don't give your speech.
yeah, that's right. You should bring a sleeping bag next time.
I found a loophole in the law here.
That's good, and that's very, well, I love it. That's procedural hardball, even though it's not even real procedure. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Great idea.
Well, it is procedure. It's absolute procedure.
I mean,
because
it's something.
It's
Is it a
norm.
rule? Is it a norm?
It's norm
No.
hardball.
Yeah, I can't read it anywhere, so it's not. Therefore, it's not procedure. I don't know, but now we've read a report on it, so now it's chronicled. That's interesting, and I guess there's a sort of an obligation to the I don't know if the networks necessarily cover, but certainly C-SPAN, and anytime anybody is still on the president, the person giving the response isn't going to want to start until everybody can pay attention to me. Not that anyone would. Interesting. Did everybody else have to wait too? All the other sort of fake responses.
Well, the only other response was
pre-taped.
Thompson. He had pre-taped his, so it didn't matter.
Yeah. Well, did we still have like 35 YouTube
I don't think
level
we had that this
responses?
time, but
okay.
I don't know. I didn't monitor YouTube.
Okay. Well, and you might. Who knows whether they'll even allow you to on Twitter or something like that. But yeah, that was for a little while. We had the 350 separate responses, and I do believe that there was a progressive caucus response, which is an interesting and sometimes awkward thing. But I think all of those are pre-taped. They're not responses per se. But all right, well, good. No one deserves to be upstaged more, or few people more than Smoky Eye Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Okay.
Anyway.
Yes.
I have almost nothing to say about Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Well, there's rarely anything to say about her. She's just an unremarkable person in general.
Right. And so the fact that Biden did what he did, I'm going to give you a rundown of some of the Twitter remarks real time from folks as they reacted to everything that we just described.
Okay. Does that
This
cost
is
you any
David
money?
Jolly.
You have to
This
pay
is all from the
Elon?
Pundit Roundup. David Jolly, I'm not sure anyone expected Biden to so quickly and ably put Republicans on the ropes and then just keep swinging, all with a smile on his face. This is a very good speech and a very good look for the president. And then he goes on to say, a confident president seizing momentum and politely boxing in Republicans, a very impressive political moment. Mm-hmm. Okay, which I think was all true.
Yeah.
Timothy Burke
Sounds
has
right.
a video in a tweet. CNN is reporting Mitt Romney told George Santos, "You don't belong here" before tonight's State of the Union. Here's a video of that interaction. You can't exactly hear what they're saying, but you can if you can read lips, you can make it up. Anthony Michael Crease, lawyer. This was much more antagonistic and feisty than anticipated. Joanne Freeman. Some of what we saw during that address was a skilled politician in action. He handled the room. He dealt with hecklers. He successfully baited Republicans. He not only successfully gave the address, he also filled the office. And David Pepper, can we do another one of these next month?
No,
And Jen
try.
Psaki's actual quote that I had mentioned a couple of times, which he actually said was thoughts and prayers for the staffers trying to move Joe Biden out of one of his favorite places.
Okay. Well, the sentiment was correct.
Right. So, overall, very, very good night for Democrats. And
Yes.
again, it's not just me who's thinking that Biden really hit it out of the park. When you look at places like Politico and how they cover it, and the fact that they cover the fact that, all of the, in parentheses, stupid, end parentheses, emphasis on what the poll numbers say out of context. Like not even comparing him to other presidents at this time. He's way higher than Ronald Reagan was at this time.
Oh, all right.
Just completely lose focus of what's really going on. The GOP is in such bad shape. And in fact, it's important that they're in bad shape because of who they are. We talk all the time about who they are, but the fact that they're in bad shape because of it is really good news for America.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it, certainly. More enthusiastic about the future when you see a day like this.
Yeah. Michael Steele, Republicans wanted to own the libs, but instead Biden owned the Republicans. It's basically what happened.
Okay.
So I think
I'll take it.
All very important.
It sounds that way. And, what a great report. It could easily go the other way with a less experienced politician. I'm sure the Republicans who spent their time shouting and jeering thought that they were going to rattle Biden, throw him off his game, and cause him to do something wrong that was viewed as a gaffe.
Right.
And,
I mean, the last president, just off the top of my head that I recall, being able to handle jeering and put downs as easily and as deftly was Bill Clinton during his State of the Union years, particularly after he lost midterms. And the Republicans thought, we have him exactly where we want him. Let's just go after him. Mm-hmm. And it didn't work out.
Well, there are some people who are very practiced at that. Yeah. All right. It's good. And
it's a political art, so some people are good at it. It turns out Joe Biden's good at it.
Yeah. I wonder what would have. I wonder what would have happened. It's hard to imagine Democrats acting, in the same manner. But I'm just sort of curious. How would Trump have handled being jeered and yelled at during his speeches?
So Elise Slotkin was on Morning Joe this morning dealing with that very question. And she said, it was really weird being in the chamber there because I was in the chamber for Donald Trump and I didn't agree with just about anything he did. But we were very respectful and we didn't jeer. And whenever he said anything that had to do with American patriotism or American leadership, we stood up and cheered because that's what you do with the president. It's a matter of respect. And watching my colleagues in the chamber go all Joe Wilson was just like really jarring.
Yeah, it's definitely getting worse by far. Yeah, I'm curious how. Yeah, I can't imagine. I don't think I've ever really seen Trump in that situation, except I guess at his rallies where it's a kind of a different dynamic, and he says stuff like "throw that guy out, kick his ass. I want his, crack his skull." In the old days, they would have beat the hell out of that guy, that sort of thing. I would be interested. Can you say that in the House chamber during the State of the Union? I feel like no.
Well, who? You mean like
Trump,
the president could say it?
Yeah. I'm just curious, what would Trump's response to jeering during his own State of the Union be? And I don't know who would even start that, but how would he deal with that? I don't know.
No, he probably would have said that.
Yeah.
In the old days, you would have been caned.
Right. And he'd be, if he remembered that was the case, I'd be astonished. But yeah.
You never know. Anyway, what other topics are there to talk about? Here's an interesting piece by Trip Gabriel in the New York Times. Education issues vault to top of the GOP's presidential race. Donald Trump and possible rivals like Ron DeSantis are making appeals to conservative voters on race and gender issues, but such messages had a mixed record in November's midterm election.
To say the least. Yes.
Right. The messaging casts Republicans as defenders of parents who feel schools have run amok with wokeness. Its loudest champion has been Ron DeSantis, who last week scored an apparent victory attacking the College Board's curriculum in African American studies. And Trump has sought to catch up with even hotter language, threatening severe consequences for educators who suggest to a child they could be trapped in the wrong body. But its appeal to voters, culture war messaging concerning education, has a decidedly mixed track record. While some Republicans believe the issue can win over independents, especially suburban women, you got to be kidding. Specifically on critical race theory and so-called gender ideology, they were largely a dud in the general election.
Yeah.
It's really important for Republicans really to lose elections because it's the only way to convince them they're idiots.
And even that doesn't often
Well, you need to do it 2 or 3 times. One isn't enough because they're not bright enough to understand what happened. Well, so you have to beat them 2 or 3 times. It's really that simple, folks.
Maybe more.
And that should be the message that Democrats bring in.
And certainly
you have to beat these people because they're too stupid to understand what it means to lose. You have to make them lose 2 or 3 times before they can start, having it sink in to their thick skulls. That really should be your message.
Well, it should absolutely be the practice, but it might have to be, 15 17 times. Who knows? Because, I mean, what we're, of course, currently experiencing is having beaten them a couple of elections in a row. You know, they lost the 2020 presidential election, and Trump's tenure in office was marked by continued losses. He lost all sorts of leverage and power, and they lost control of Congress, and then they lost the 2020 presidential election, and then they really basically lost the 2022 elections. But they're out there still not only doing what they do, but denying that they lost those elections. So they really have to beat these guys over the head to get them to realize it.
He writes, Trip Gabriel does, the political power of opposition to critical race theory, which became a grab bag for conservative complaints about the teaching of American history and racial inequality, largely petered out by last year's midterm. A September polling memo by the Republican National Committee warned candidates focusing on CRT and masks excites a GOP base, but parental rights and quality education drive independence.
That's
so
what they're
you have to
thinking.
shift your language.
They do have to be a lot more careful if they think they're going to do it. I know they think that's where they think they can appeal to suburban women, is the gentle version of this.
But the problem is the gentle version dilutes what they're saying to the point where you don't understand it, as we talked about on the show the other day. So if you have to explain what it is, you're no longer gentle. It's just that their issues are so clearly non-gentle that if you explain them, you can't do it in a nice way. It's impossible to be a compassionate conservative and explain what you really mean.
Yeah, it seems like the article, I don't know whether they really come out and say, but
we really gently have to approach the fact that we want to track your daughter's periods.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way of explaining it.
How are you going to explain that?
And that's their big problem, is that people say, oh, well, for suburban women, we're saying we just think parents should be respected about whether or not they want their kids to have either sex education, or we want to make sure that we're teaching kids to be proud of their heritage no matter what it is.
What you really want to say is you want to respect your parents' rights to decide things.
Yes, and that's what they're hoping.
We don't have to be specific about those things.
Yeah, if we tell you the
things, find out
what
those things are, you're going to say, "Oh,
yeah." And there's still the problem. There's still this residual, memory in suburban parents' minds that they say these things, but then you give them the chance to implement them, and they start screaming about Jewish space lasers. You can't give these guys the chance to do that. They're lying about what they're going to be concerned about when they're in office, and that's sort of an everybody knows it baseline assumption now.
Right. So here crazy. They refer to Glenn Youngkin and how he did it in 2021.
Yeah, but he's living off of that.
Right. Kristen Davison, a political advisor to Mr. Youngkin, said that in 2021, it was successful in part because it delivered nuanced and tailored messages on education. The campaign micro-targeted messages to each segment, including voters most interested in school choice, opposed to critical race theory, and those concerned about safety. The strategy aimed to reverse Democrats' historical advantage on which party voters trust in education. And so
by lying,
then the question is going to be, well, how do you play that out? And how do you trust the same Republicans in Congress who couldn't sit quietly despite what Kevin McCarthy told them and started yelling out, "You lie"? How are you going to convince them to be nuanced about how you're going to approach education?
Yeah, especially when Youngkin really has not actually mastered that skill. He is the governor, and that was the one test that he had. But A, he'll never retake that test, and B, this has been found out. This is a stale strategy that was recognized and rebuked a year later in 2022. And Youngkin is still governor because it's a 4-year term, but he's still kind of walking around like, oh, I have the secret formula. Right, and he just happened to hit it at the right time, and that time has passed.
Yes, exactly right. And in polling, Jeff Garin, the Democratic pollster, says, in addition to focusing on things that voters see as the wrong priorities, I expect that Republicans will deepen their problems with suburban voters by identifying so closely with book banning and whitewashing treatment of race in schools. And basically, it's a question of how you're going to present it. Now, Terry McAuliffe didn't do a great job of presenting the issue. Is if you do what Youngkin says, you're going to wind up with book banning or whitewashing race discussions or history discussions, which would be a better way to phrase it than race discussions. It's the same thing, but it sounds better to suburban voters. So he didn't do that. He ignored the issue and paid the price for it.
Yeah, I guess so. And so it was certainly a lot less, I think, about Glenn Youngkin's mastery of the rhetoric than it was about a giant hole being left for him to drive his truck through.
Which, again, gets back to what we said about Joe Biden. You can't measure him against perfection. He'll always not do as well as you would think. You have to measure him against the hole he's actually running against. In which case, he looks like a mountain.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean...
Well, he's only an inch high, but yeah, compared to that hole, he looks like a mountain.
Well, it'll be an interesting retail politics matchup if it is, say, him and Ron DeSantis, right? The town hall debate format ought to be interesting between the two of them.
Well, as somebody pointed out last night, Joe Biden looked like the Biden that debated Paul Ryan.
Yeah, I hadn't forgotten about that, or hadn't thought about that in a long time. Okay, yeah. Well, it's the same guy. So as it turns out, it makes sense. Yep. All right. Very interesting. Lots to absorb. I did see that discussion of that New York Times article. And people were passing it around and appreciating that they did finally really do make mention in the body of the article that, for once, saying the thing that Republicans think is going to be the strategy that carries them to victory isn't really all that effective. Right. And is kind of unpopular.
And then finally, this is an article from a place called New America, but it's written by Lee Drutman, who's a political scientist I like to follow.
And an old America.
Understanding the partisan divide, how demographics and policy views shape party coalitions. Key takeaways here. Democratic and Republican districts differ in important ways on demographic variables and policy views. Our winner-take-all system reduces the differences to a binary, hiding the diversity of districts. Republican districts are some of the least ethnically diverse districts, but voters within the districts have very diverse policy views, particularly on economic issues. Well, that's easy to see. Let's take Macomb County in Michigan, the traditional Reagan Democrat. You can see a least ethnically diverse district, probably more diverse than it was at the time that Stan Greenberg invented the Reagan Democrat term. But still, you can imagine ethnic voters who are socially conservative but economically liberal. They're union guys.
All right. In this case, when we say ethnic voters, we're thinking what? Eastern European ethnic?
Well, Italian, Polish.
Okay.
Eastern Europe, the Yonkers district that I grew up in.
Okay. Except now in Michigan.
But within those districts, they have diverse policy views, particularly on economic issues. Therefore, if you want to unite the voters, you go culture war.
I guess so.
Because if you go economics, you're going to divide them.
That's
the
boring.
Union workers will vote with the Democrats, and the small business owners will vote with the Republicans. But if you go culture war, they all vote for you.
I guess so.
That's why they do it.
Yeah.
In Democratic districts, they're some of the most ethnically diverse districts, but voters within the districts are mostly in agreement on social and economic issues. So you don't have to concentrate on social and economic issues. But if you do, you will wind up getting most of the voters.
Okay.
And doing a culture war isn't particularly helpful because let's say your voting district is a combination of, Upper East Side and parts of Harlem. You're better off, if you want to unite everybody on the same page, looking at economic issues.
I guess so.
So you're going to handle a Democratic district, especially in primaries. You're going to handle a Democratic district election quite different than you're going to handle a Republican district, given that context.
Yes.
And then competitive districts include roughly equal numbers of ethnically diverse and ethnically homogeneous districts, and while they lean towards a conservative side on social and economic issues, they have a wide mix of policy views, and therefore, guess what? They're persuadable. That's why they're competitive.
Yeah. All right.
So
how do we persuade them?
One size doesn't fit all is the point. And depending upon what district you're talking about, House district, this doesn't necessarily apply statewide, but if you're talking about a House district, you can understand why Republicans go all in on culture wars, even though it doesn't make sense for the rest of us.
Right. Sure. I mean, it only makes sense for their narrow slice, and it only makes sense because there's no other thing that the bulk of the district agrees on in any way.
Yeah, so basically what you're trying to do is find the thing that the district agrees on. And in Republican districts, you want to stay away from policy. That's what this is saying.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing about policy that's going to be like everybody agrees on. Policy is going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
But if you want to do culture wars, we agree on that. So okay, that's what we're going to focus on.
So they're just electing radio hosts, really.
Yeah, pretty much.
I should be doing more culture war, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Democratic districts, that's where you're going to you're really interested in social and economic issues. So focus on policy.
Oh, I guess that's right. If I want to do culture war, I need a new audience. I like this one. Yeah, so we'll do the policy.
You have to go to YouTube.
Yeah, right. That's true. Although, there's another one of those areas where it's very frustrating where you say, if you say
You'll
something
have to use
stupid,
a camera when you do the podcast.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's true. But get a camera and say dumb things, and I don't know, somehow you're a millionaire from YouTube. But analyze what's really going on, talk about what's in the news and why it makes a difference, and, help people understand what's going on in their government and political system. Radio and a struggle. Okay. I like that better anyway. I couldn't get up in the morning. I don't know. Maybe I could. For $1 million, I suppose I could get up and do culture war on YouTube. But I don't know that anybody would want to look at it. All right. Well, thank you, Greg. We've made it all the way through our hour, practically up to our music in just a few seconds. Thank you for watching the State of the Union and the aftermath. I feel like I missed out on one for the first time in 12 years. I feel like I missed something significant and interesting. You've convinced me. I'm persuadable. So how do you like that?
Well, watch this one, but don't watch future ones.
Okay. Well,
they're not likely to be as good, but
if I
who knows?
Turn back the clock.
Maybe this is the new standard.
Yeah, right. And certainly now you have to tune in to see what fireworks the opposition is going to set off. All right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you then and see what's changed between now and then and whether it all falls apart. But thanks, and we'll check in with you later. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Hey, by the way, this might be a good time to sort of pause things and thank everybody who has responded. There's been I would say, let's see, would this qualify as an overwhelming response? I think so. Some really good response to, and this frequently happens, and the real answer to this is if I update the little promos that we do during the breaks every once in a while, people respond to them. You hear them, and I think really just changing them is a reminder to people, oh yeah, I wanted to record a segment and send it in, or I wanted to find a way to make a contribution to support the show. And big response to this one, of course, the newest update. I'm sure you've heard it by now on the looking, to drum up support for the show, sustaining support for the show. Yes, there was the unfortunate news that we retreated some from our high water mark and had fewer Patreon sponsors at the point, in the last couple of weeks when we revised the message than we had before. And so there was a nice response, and I'll have to check the numbers and see how we're doing in terms of catching up on that. But even before that new message went up, we picked up a couple of new people that we have not yet called out on the air for thanks. But going back, in fact, to immediately post-Christmas, and this is as immediately post-Christmas as you can get, Boxing Day, 12/26. My special Boxing Day message, obviously, pulled in new Patreon supporter under the name of Macabre. But it's Maukabre, fun and interesting new spelling. So hopefully I'm actually getting the inside reference and pronouncing the name correctly. Also, Caduceus S. Am I pronouncing that one correctly? That followed him up on 1227. Him. I'm assigning a gender, and I shouldn't have done it. And it's not woke to say so. It's just being courteous. Also, well, some of these names are fun online handles, and not always does everybody want to be identified personally, etc. There are many people who like to make their contributions either anonymously or remain pseudonymous so that they are not identified for whatever reason. It's a weird world out there. But then one more, I think prior to the new message going up, just identified as RB, R_B, if you really want to get technical about it, who also joined our Patreon ranks on the 6th of January. And then I think following the posting of this new message, we add users and listeners, Ruth Tinklepaw. How about that? That's a interesting one. And I'm not sure, there was something else that came, I think when I looked that one up just to see, whether there was any alternative ID on that one, but no, I don't think so. But at any rate, Ruth Tinklepaw, thanks very much for joining our ranks on the 23rd of January. I think probably, maybe, I'm presuming too much perhaps in response to the new message. But like I said, here on the 23rd, then on the 25th, David Littlefield, boosting his existing contribution. So again, getting the message. And then the return to the ranks of Patrick Snyder, who mentioned that, and maybe this is something people want to check. I don't know whether you get a notice or something, but a lot of times when people are paying a monthly contribution and you get a new credit card and your old credit card number expires, and maybe Patreon isn't always that fantastic at reminding you when that happens, but he said it happened to him, and we're happy to have him back among the ranks of our supporters. Elsie as well on February 1st, and we got 3 people just jumped into the pool on February 1st. Elsie, Ride the Curve, and Sue Resigna. So I hope I have not mispronounced anybody's names, but I appreciate it. Of course, as always, it does make it possible for this to continue, and we save face at home with the production crew when we say, there's some income from this. It's not totally irresponsible for me to say that, yes, every day from 9 to 11 a.m., I'm going to get on the fake internet radio that we've cobbled together here and borrowing the actual real internet technology from Netroots Radio to come to the rest of you and speak to you. And people find it important, and please, rather than force me out the door and into an office job, can't we just hang on just a little longer? One day, our ship will come in and there'll be a new liberal radio network that's highly capitalized, and they'll say, you have the back catalog and the audience that we're looking for, and this will become a real production. And then, wow, what could happen then? Well, then for one thing, lots of people could, get some extra income and or make a living off of this show. We could have a big production staff. We could send Scott more money, like actually, make a dent in his life instead of just this token, that we're able to send. I'm apologizing to you as I'm speaking, Scott. It's a wonderful service that you provide, and I wish it was something that we could, make a sustainable living at for you, because it's fun, and why not? And Republicans do it all the time, and it grieves me to no end to hear things like Spotify paying people tens of millions of dollars to provide garbage for Republicans, whereas, we have to provide for ourselves. So thank you to everybody who goes out of their way and does that. It's still unclear to me exactly, this is one of those inexact sciences, how many people are listening, how many people are downloading, but it still seems like we are trafficking in about 1,000 downloaded episodes per day, per 24-hour period. They're not always all the same episodes, so it's a little difficult to say, but it's still, it seems like about 1,000 people are downloading something each day. And if, I don't know who they are, or maybe it's 100 people downloading 10 episodes a day. I don't know what's going on. But if it was a pay-per-view type service, which wouldn't be a bad way of setting it up. I don't know if how many people would do it, but like I always say, if you can drop 99 cents on an app in the App Store without thinking about it, might 99 cents dropped in a can somewhere, or $1, or more likely the number you would use, to pick up today's show. 2 hours of entertainment. That's not nothing. And, if that were the case, well, then we really would be a well-funded, operation. If, people were dropping $1 in for every show that they downloaded, it seems like nothing off the top, although for some people, the numbers add up. I understand that. And, even though it makes it seem like, well, I would definitely do that, $1, or like I say, you can't even get a coffee for $1. In some places, you can't even get a Coke out of the machine for $1 anymore. So that used to be my old reference for these things. But yeah, $1 is something that, generally speaking, you might not be loath to part with. But, we produce 22 shows a month here. So once you start telling people $20 a month, and then you realize, well, there's a lot of these months in each year, and now $240, $250 a year to support it at that level. But we do a lot of shows. So we don't actually ask that you shell it out at that level necessarily. If you can, terrific, whatever. But we appreciate even every contribution we have. And if enough people are doing it, then yeah, it works out. So anyway, thanks again to everybody who has taken the time, more than anything else, to go ahead and just show me that you're out there and that it makes a difference to you, whether I get up in the morning or struggle through a show just, when I have this kind of congestion or something. That's really the way to show that it means something, that I'm trying to do it. So I really appreciate it. And it makes it possible to get up and do it each day, especially when the news is what it is sometimes. Today was good news. So I was glad to be able to host Greg for that report, because I didn't have anything to tell you about it. All right. So let's see. A number of things I wanted to get to. Maybe, I know it's going to be a tough slog, but I want to go back to, how I am. I get obsessive about reading the entirety of information-rich articles to you. So it's a big shift in momentum and a big shift in the story. And of course, now I have to try and find out where we left off. But yesterday I was reading to you the report of the OCCRP, right? The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, about the Kremlin-linked group, as the headline says, arranging for payments to European politicians to support Russia's annexation of Crimea. I think it's an important backgrounder. One, because it's current, and two, because it gets at the point that we were making, looking back at considerably older news, that there was this weird way in which somehow, and I don't know that we're all conscious of it happening, that the Russians made a dent in collective consciousness and convinced us to consider the annexation of Crimea as something, A, other than an invasion, and B, as something that was either legitimate or could be legitimized. I mean, this really is something that really shouldn't be legitimized, but we all got kind of talked into it, and it wasn't entirely clear at the time to those who weren't being paid that this was a paid PR operation. By the way, speaking of paid PR operations, I now have a message that it's an odd interruption, but it's true, and I should pass this on. Scott has a good point and a good question. As we were just talking about all the support for the show, he said, ask them if they want merch. Do you want merchandise? That's a thing that I have considered for a long time, and a lot of people have made offers to help out with it, or have said that they might be interested in it. But that's something, yeah, maybe you want to email me or use the KITM hashtag or something, or maybe the, kagrox@gmail.com if you want to get through to me. That way you got more extensive things to say. I've always been a little bit confused and reluctant about the merchandise thing because to me, I always look at it and say, who the hell wants that? But maybe everybody wants that. I don't know. And it's the sort of thing that I feel like we're such a niche show. Like, okay, let's say we had a t-shirt and you wear the t-shirt somewhere. The odds of somebody saying, hey, that's an interesting t-shirt, or where did you get that? Or I know what that is, or get out of my establishment, whatever it is, that would be, I think, fairly slim. But what a uniting experience that would be. Even if it was a get out of my establishment, it would be very interesting to have a story like that. But then we do have that story, don't we? Weren't we talking about just the other day, somebody that I know through work many years ago who I got back in touch with, they reached out to me and they said that they listened to the podcast and that they were on vacation, right? And that somebody's gotten a conversation with them about the show, which is astonishing, which I guess would happen a lot easier if you had, I don't know what, stickers, t-shirts, these coffee mugs. That's an interesting one, coffee mugs. I mean, I guess if you take it to the office, it makes sense. If you have it at home, who are you advertising to? But I don't know. But that too. What sort of merchandise? I've had a lot of suggestions, a lot of people who say, people love that stuff. Why aren't you doing it? And especially if there are providers out there that can kind of make it on spec at no cost to you, but they take a percentage of it. But what the hell? It's extra money. People like the stuff. Let me know. It's a good point. Now that we're on the subject of payoffs and corruption, back to Russia. I don't think we do it quite as badly as they do. But let me scroll down and see where we left off on this story. But again, the backgrounder here being an insider group in Russia, including people who are members and staffers of the Russian parliament, the Duma, putting together this international agency for current policy. And as we recall from yesterday, a trove of their emails having come to light through, I think, hacking activity that illustrate that there's a vast network making payments directly to European politicians at various levels, both in the European Parliament, members of national parliaments, members of local councils, regional governments, etc., being asked to place pro-Russian op-eds, essentially, in their local newspapers, being paid to bring forward resolutions expressing support for the annexation of Crimea or recognizing the annexation or being willing to do business there or calling for the dropping of sanctions imposed by various countries against Russia in retaliation for the annexation, but just trying to help create an atmosphere in which if we don't bring the West around to a pro-Russian attitude as a whole, let there at least be the normalization of what's going on, such that it's not a daily topic of conversation among normie small d Democrats in the Western democracies that, hey, this annexation of Crimea remains an illegitimate outrage, something that we should be talking about daily. And I mean, in that sense, maybe the actual heavy armored invasion of the rest of Ukraine makes us forget about Crimea. Maybe that was the goal. Putin probably thought he would win that confrontation, but if he doesn't and he retreats from Western Ukraine, he probably still thinks he has a shot at keeping and maybe annexing Eastern Ukraine. But at the very least, he probably thinks he's got a established claim to Crimea at this point. So anyway, I think we left off in the middle of the success stories section of this piece, wherein we had learned that the regional council in Veneto, Italy, had passed, thanks to this Italian politician Valdegamberi, a member at that point of the Lega Nord party, that they passed this resolution recognizing Crimea as part of Russia, and that two other councils, Italian local councils, followed suit in Liguria and Lombardy. And although that seems like small potatoes and nothing, worth very much because they don't have any influence over national policy from that level, that was nonetheless trumpeted as a huge PR victory in Russia. And then, a few months after the Veneto motion, the group achieved an even more significant victory in Cyprus. Remember that? In late April of 2016, Mizrakanyan's aide, and Mizrakanyan is the Duma staffer who was running this group, right? His aide, Areg Agasarian, sent him another project idea, suggesting a motion to be proposed in the Cypriot parliament by Andros Kyprianou, the longtime general secretary of Cyprus's Progressive Party for Working People. And I don't know how closely the labels of other international parties hew to our own definitions or understandings of these terms, so I'm not certain where they stand. Agasarian, who, like Mirzakanyan, is a graduate of Russia's diplomatic academy, had made contacts in Cyprus via Dmitry Kozlov, a Cypriot Russian businessman, who put the group in touch with pro-Russian politicians there. The motion presented by Kyprianou's party in July 2016 matched those drafted by Agasarian or his colleagues and included two additional demands. So it was like an ALEC bill. It was essentially identical in form, but then they added two additional demands. One, lifting sanctions against individual Russians and implementing the terms of the February 2015 Minsk agreements between pro-Russian forces and Ukraine. I guess also laying claim probably to the Donetsk region. And what is it? Dunbar? Is that, I can't remember the name of each of the regions that should be drummed into my head by now. But the eastern provinces, which have been occupied since 2014, but only unofficially, where they say, well, it's just pro-Russian, ethnic Russians wanting to separate is all, except it's also, Russian mercenaries, etc., etc. But anyway, the motion was passed, putting the Cypriot parliament, the national parliament, at loggerheads with the EU's own position on sanctions against Russia over the Crimea annexation. In October of 2016, Kyprianou was invited to a meeting in Moscow with Kozlov and two leading figures promoting investment in Crimea, Andrei Nazarov and Rustam Muratov. The latter pair's organization, Business Russia, played a key role alongside the International Agency for Current Policy in pushing for Europe to accept Russia's occupation of Crimea. Central to that effort were Russian state-funded trips for European politicians to an annual conference at a luxury hotel in Yalta, historic town, right? Yalta is in Crimea. Kozlov told OCCRP he knew Agasarian from university years and that he had been involved in the pro-Russia motion in Cyprus, but didn't comment on the meeting in Moscow. Kyprianou told OCCRP that Kozlov had pressured him to meet Nazarov in Moscow and said he had been unaware that the resolution on Russia was coordinated by Mizrakanyan's team. So he used ALEC-like legislation, but claims to have been unaware of the ALEC-like organization behind it. Nazarov and Muratov did not respond to requests for comment. And now, a section about the Crimean junkets that were handed out in furtherance of this scheme. In several cases, the establishment of cooperation between European politicians and the Kremlin can be traced back to the Yalta International Economic Forums, organized with the help of Mizrakanyan and his group. Business Russia's Muratov and Nazarov were also executives at the forum, which the U.S. Treasury Department described as, quote, the main Russian platform for showcasing investment opportunities in Crimea. They don't come straight out and say it's a propaganda operation, but they do recognize what's going on here. In April of 2016, Mirzakhanian sent Muratov a document entitled European Estimates, which listed 9 European politicians from Austria, Germany, Italy, the Czech Republic, and Poland who would attend the Yalta Forum, along with a total of 21,500 euros worth of honoraria broken down by politician. These fees appear to go beyond compensation for expenses, since travel costs for each attendee were discussed in separate email exchanges. Another set of emails reveal how the organizers bought tickets worth 7,600 euros to fly in the 9 political figures. So a good deal of money being spent to bring them to a fancy economic conference in Yalta, which is in Crimea, with the aim of encouraging investment in Crimea, which of course has the aim of normalizing the Russian annexation. Marcus Pretzel, I guess, and it's probably not just pretzel. There's 2 L's in this, so I don't know. But he's a former member of the European Parliament from Germany, so a German pretzel, if you were wondering about that, whose name was listed in the document. He denied being offered any money for his presence at the Yalta Forum. I was offered membership on the board of the forum, which I rejected, he told OCCRP. Current member of the Austrian Parliament, Axel Kassiger, and former politician Barbara Rosenkranz, both affiliated with the right-wing Freedom Party of Austria, that's the FPO in the native language, are also named in the European Estimates document. They told OCCRP they did not receive payments either. I don't know whether they don't think that those were payments for those things, or they're just lying, or the payment came in another form, or it's misinformation in the documents. We don't know yet. The purchase of the flights was organized by a marketing director from Granel, a major Russian construction company, co-founded and chaired by the Yalta Forum executive Nazarov. So they used their own personal businesses and business empires to try and fund some of this stuff as well. The organizers also funded the politicians' accommodation at the 5-star Maria Resort and Spa. That's M-R-I-Y-A, Maria. I don't know whether that's a cognate of the name Maria or what. But anyway, this is a $300 million hotel on the shores of the Black Sea. The Russian government and a mix of state-backed and private banks sponsored the event, according to the Yalta Forum's website, and the state-owned Sberbank, we've heard about them before, financed the construction of the hotel, which would later be sanctioned by the U.S. for its role as host. So in the U.S., we appear to be recognizing this and making sure that our own politicians don't go. It's a very clearly sanctioned event, or that is to say, sanctioned in the sense that we are disapproving of it, not sanctioning it in the... That's a very weird word, isn't it? Sanctioning. Anyway, but there's sanctions against the event. There's sanctions against the hotel. There are sanctions individually for other reasons against the banks that financed the hotel, about sanctions against the businesses that sponsored the event, sanctions against individuals who worked at the event, all sorts of things. This is a very clear red flag in America, but I guess not so much in the rest of Europe. It is important, and by the way, although it was all sanctioned and there are plenty of red flags, there are still, at this point, plenty of Republican elected officials still doing things like going to Russia for the 4th of July in the middle of all this. It is important for Russia to have Western politicians visit Crimea in order to normalize and whitewash their illegal invasion and occupation, Lautman said. I don't know who Lautman is in this. I forget at what point earlier in the story he was identified, but he seems to have a pretty clear picture of what's going on here. Domestically, Russia uses these visits for propaganda to show that Europe not only accepts the annexation of Crimea, but there is nothing illegal about this aggression. That's the hope and the aim of the program. Russia wins in its PR operations every single time a politician or influential figure visits Moscow or Crimea, which, of course, I remind you, because as we were just saying, a ton of Republican elected officials here in the United States have awarded those PR victories in the recent past. From the outset, Ukraine protested the attendance of European politicians at the Yalta forums, but more and more of them continued to visit in 2017, 18, and 19. The subsequent events, by the way, after 2019 were canceled due to the pandemic, which this show ought to be canceled due to the pandemic. As I struggle through the last segment, I think I'll be okay. Give me 2 minutes to try and regain composure. And then, of course, we'll continue with the story. It's extraordinarily long, but I think we can get through it inside of the next segment. And I got another one to throw on the fire as well. Then we can wrap things up for the day, move on to more current events, and prepare for Thursday. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, and before we dive in back into the article, I want to update you on little notes that I've been sent along the way, including one less, let's say less controversial a little bit this time, from the mighty OCD, who sends me the Twitter comments of the wag known as Liam Neeson. Get it? Liam Neeson commenting about Kyrsten Sinema and her wacky yellow dress, saying Kyrsten Sinema is the type of person who would wear a wedding dress to someone else's wedding. I guess somehow that does make sense. And this does look like it might have been somebody's bridesmaid dress at some point, although yellow, that neon yellow, seems like maybe not the color that you would put the bridesmaids in. But you never know. And the Daily Show making that exact comment, as a matter of fact, in the comments or responses to Liam here, the Daily Show tweeting, wow, you think it'll never happen, but it looks like she did wear that bridesmaid dress again. I think that's basically true. All right. Well, anyway, that beside the main point, but still in what do we say? Confluence, let's say. I don't know. That's a good word for it. With the main point, Darwin letting us know, now think about it, the merch question. I'd pay for a KITM ball cap, and that's well within the bounds of the usual sorts of easy to make or easy to offer merchandise when you outsource it's not. I'm not going to be stitching the ball cap. You understand that? Yes. But then of course, I guess the only other thing was we have to sort of maybe design the artwork for it. We could use the existing show artwork, I guess, but we might have to manipulate the sizes and resolutions and such. So there's a little bit of work involved, but I don't know. If people are into it, they're into it. And maybe 12 years into the show would be the time to say, all right, we'll finally allow you to have something with the name of the show on it for whatever you intend to do with it, whether you're polishing the car with the T-shirt, wearing the ball cap, but wearing it ironically, that would be okay too, because the money is real, whether it was spent ironically or not, or wearing it with great pride, and we'll hope for the latter rather than the former. But just interesting to see whether any of the rest of you think that might be something you want to see added to the lineup. But first, you need to know about Russian corruption, not good old-fashioned American grifting. Russian corruption. Where did we leave off? Right, just at the end of that section. Moving on to the next one, observers doing business. This is an interesting explanation of just why some of this stuff was controversial. If you don't accept, and it's worth questioning right off the bat, well, is it corrupt in itself to make a visit? Well, when the place has been illegally annexed, yes. Really not that difficult a decision to make. But there's another level to what's going on here. Among the correspondence between Mirzakhanian and Russian politicians are emails from Leonid Slutsky. You really want to change that name if you're moving to the United States, but Slutsky, a longtime member of Russia's Duma aligned with the Kremlin, who chairs the Committee on International Affairs. Interesting. So maybe they'll eventually throw him off of that like they did with Ilhan Omar. Anyway, not while he's aligned with the Kremlin. Anyway, unless he falls out of favor, who knows? An exchange from 2000, or falls out a window, now that I mentioned it. But all right, now that I think of it. An exchange from 2017 reveals how Mirzakhanian's and Slutsky's teams worked together to bring prominent Europeans to observe local elections in Russia, covering their travel and accommodation costs. So basically looking for international observers to show how free, fair, and open Russian elections are, including, I don't know whether this one is included here, but they've done the same, for instance, in calling in observers to observe the annexation referendum. We let the local populace vote. Self-determination, you see, is what drove the annexation. Whether that was a free, fair, and open election or not, open to question. But if the observers, the international observers who declare it free, fair, and open are, paid for by the Russians who are hoping for or arranging for the positive outcome of the referendum, well, that poses some problems about the independence of their observation, right? And if this team of people are paying for the travel and accommodations of the elections observers, you're not supposed to accept it under those conditions. The invitations were arranged through an NGO that Slutsky led, Russian Peace Foundation. And the 2017 election observation project had a budget of at least 68,000 euros, according to the leaked emails. Maybe if you're trying to claim innocence in all this, you say, I don't know, the Russian Peace Foundation said they were sponsoring this thing. I didn't realize that the Russian Peace Foundation was run by either a Russian oligarch, paid for by a Russian oligarch, and operated by their lackeys. I don't know, but you probably should have guessed. If the UN is paying for you to go and observe, that's presumably something that would be on the up and up. Unless you're not a believer in the UN and its mission, which is a different story. But if the Russian anything is paying for it, or something that could be paid for secretly by Russian oligarchs behind the scenes, you want to be aware of that. Well, they weren't. 3 members of the European Parliament and several local parliamentarians from countries like Belgium and Sweden were flown in for the occasion. Now, a quote here, fake election observation is often an entry door to other pro-Kremlin activities. So don't think you're off the hook or that they're not going to come after you for something else later on, which then might end up also in financial relationships or corruption, which, there's very few, I think, financial relationships that would follow from something like this that don't qualify as corruption. But this, according to Stephanie Schiffer. chair of the Board of European Platform for Democratic Elections, an organization that tracks election observation missions in Russia and elsewhere. The Code of Conduct for International Election Observers says they should not accept funding or infrastructural support from the government whose elections are being observed, as it may raise a significant conflict of interest and undermine confidence in the integrity of the mission's findings. Schiffer said the 2017 mission contradicted this requirement. Other politicians with ties to Mirzakhanian's International Agency for Current Policy observed more recent Russian elections. For example, the Italian councillor, Valde Gamberi, attended the Russian presidential election in annexed Crimea in 2018 and was also an election observer at the 2021 Russian parliamentary elections. So he's making a habit of it. I was struck by the transparency of everything, he told Russian media during the 2021 vote. How surprising that that same transparency is paying for his stay in luxury hotels and all of his travel while he's there. Earlier emails show Valde Gamberia had seemingly sought to monetize his Kremlin connections. After the 2016 Yalta Forum, he flew to Crimea seeking business relationships and brought other Italian politicians with him, 3 from the Veneto region, plus 1 each from Tuscany, Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna, and Liguria. A delegation of Italian investors joined the trip, and you may remember that in 2 of those other regions, Lombardy and Liguria, they followed the model of Veneto in passing resolutions recognizing the annexation of Crimea at some point. For Stefano, that's his first name, Valde Gamberi, the result of the trip was not purely PR, but the organization of promising contacts for business ventures, which pay for his election campaigns and support his political viability, wrote one of Mirzakhanian's European associates in an email to him in October 2016, just after the delegation's visit to Crimea. So essentially confirming, yes, this will work with Stefano. He needs to develop business contacts because his business wealth helps support his political career and makes it viable. We support him in business, and he supports us in politics. The strategy bore some fruit. The chairman of the State Council of the so-called Republic of Crimea, as they call it there, I guess, signed a cooperation agreement with the president of the Veneto Regional Council, promising to build economic ties. And Russian state media announced various business deals established between Italian industrialists from elsewhere and Crimea. Valde Gamberi, of course, did not respond to the reporter's questions. Now, key allies in Austria, Germany, and Poland come under focus. The leaked emails show how 4 specific political figures in Europe worked especially closely with Mirzakhanian and his group. Robert Stelzel, a pro-Russia activist from Austria. Manuel Ochsenreiter, okay, that's my best stab at this member of Germany's populist right-wing AfD party in his name, and also Mateusz Piskorski, a Polish political activist arrested, by the way, in 2016 for spying for Russia, just in case you think there might not be anything there, and Piskorski's wife, Marina Klebanovich, who helped coordinate the agency's activities in Europe. Stelzel had worked for Piskorski's think tank, the European Center for Geopolitical Analysis, and it was through Piskorski that Stelzel was invited to the 2016 Yalta Forum. How would you like to be that guy who got invited to the Yalta Forum by a Polish activist who was later arrested for spying for Russia? It might make you look over your shoulder. Emails show him setting up a call with Mirzakhanian that led to a close working relationship. Stelzel, we're talking about here. They subsequently exchanged more than 90 emails. These indicate Stelzel was paid for publishing Kremlin-coordinated articles in the Swiss magazine Zeitfragen. Fragen, You tell me about Swiss German pronunciation. In an email exchange from September 23rd, 2016, Stelzel complained to Klebanovich, that's Piskorski's wife, right, about the quality of an article he was being asked to sign. So not only do you have to do this, but they give you garbage at that. As it will be paid, Sargis, I think that's the first name of one of, is that Mirzakanyan's first name? Sargis doesn't want explanations, but wants to get a text, she told him. Well, if he wants to get the message printed, he has to accept that it must be of a style and content that is acceptable, he responded, adding, I am not a robot. He's standing up for himself in this bribery situation. 4 days later, an article by Stelzel ran in the magazine praising Russia's most recent Duma elections as transparent, open, and legitimate. Stelzel had also set up and joined the Italian delegation to Crimea, led by Valdegamberi, in October of 2016, and seems to have acted as an intermediary between the Russian propagandists and European politicians. Stelzel had worked for the Austrian member of the European Parliament, Ewald Stadler, a former member of the FPO party, which was a key ally in the International Agency for Current Policy. FPO members, we've been mentioning them all along, right, joined the Italians in their 2016 trip to occupied Crimea and were regular attendees at the Yalta Forums. The Yalta Forum even held a gala event in Vienna in 2018. The year before the gala, Mirzakanyan's group arranged for a 25-strong FPO delegation to visit Moscow. Stelzel told reporters he had fully supported Russia for decades and now even more than ever, but would not respond to requests for answers to specific questions. In Germany, Oschenreiter, I hope I've got that close, demanded thousands of euros to publish pro-Russia articles orchestrated by Mirzakanyan's associates in the magazine he edited, Zurst. I don't know how you pronounce that. Zurst, and an exclamation point at that. Zurst. Or, who knows whether I'm even close. Besides Germans. Emails show this propaganda campaign had a budget of 12,000 euros and included plans for an interview with AFD's Markus Pretzel, remember him, on the problems with Russian sanctions, which was published in July of 2016. As with FPO in Austria, AFD was a key ally for the International Agency for Current Policy. Mirzakanyan's emails include a plan to fund the 2017 political campaign of AFD's Markus Frohnmayer and show how in March of 2016, the network worked on a draft of AFD's anti-sanctions resolution, which was submitted at the Legislative Assembly of Baden-Württemberg 2 months later. Again, working in the sub-national level policy-making bodies, but just trying to get a toehold wherever they could. So now they're not only drafting articles for them, but once again drafting legislation, or in this case, I guess, a resolution for the party platform, I suppose, and then later an anti-sanctions resolution at the state level in Germany. Oschenreiter was later investigated for drumming up hatred between Ukraine and Hungary, interestingly enough, via false flag arson attacks. Wow, against a Hungarian center in Ukraine. But this is interesting. So this is the end of the Oschenreiter story here. He's drumming up hatred between Ukraine and Hungary via a false flag arson attack. Then, I guess, is found out about it, investigated, flees to Moscow. Wow. So he takes off and flees. Was it Germany or Austria where he was from? I think, he might have been German. He flees to Moscow, and then guess what happens? Well, he dies suddenly in 2021 in Moscow. Did he fall out a window? Did he drink the wrong tea? I don't know. But that's the end of Oschenreiter. Piskorski was apprehended in Poland in May of 2016, 2 months before a NATO summit in Warsaw. Emails show Mirzakhanian had planned a massive pro-Russian influence peddling operation for the event with the help of Piskorsky's party, Smena. Piskorsky was charged with carrying out espionage for Russian and Chinese intelligence, interestingly enough, and though he was released on bail in 2019, he remains under police supervision. Piskorsky and Klebanovich, don't know how she pronounces her last name, did not respond to requests for comment. Can you tell me how you pronounce your name? Documents setting out Piskorsky and Mirzakhanian's plan, which aimed to promote anti-NATO stances in various countries during the Warsaw Summit, included the names of a journalist and 4 political figures that they were working with. In 2021, 2 of them, Lithuanian Algirdas Paleckis and Hungarian Bela Kovac, were found guilty of spying for Russia. There's an awful lot of spying for Russia going on among these ranks. While Mirzakhanian has disappeared from the public eye, stay away from the windows, his group's allies in Europe continue to make pro-Moscow statements and agitate for Russian interests. So I guess the money is still flowing. AfD's Frohnmayer has criticized Germany for helping Ukraine. FPO's Axel Kassiger demanded in September of last year that Austria review its stance on Russian sanctions, and Robert Stelzel was photographed at a pro-Russian rally in Vienna in November wearing a t-shirt sporting the infamous Russian Z symbol and the text Russian Army. Now that's pretty difficult to explain, right? But here's his explanation for it. Asked by reporters about the photo, Stelzel was unapologetic. I bought this from Serbia. I don't know how that's supposed to mean anything, but okay. It is of good quality, breathable, and the message is right. Oh, okay. Finally going to, yeah, they were asking you about the breathability of the fabric. That's the question. But he admits the message is right. I'm going to wear the Russian Army Z symbol in support of their third round of heavy mechanized, hot war and everything invasion of all of the rest of Ukraine, including Kyiv. Wow. So, okay, there's a lot going on, but okay, these are Russian, or rather European politicians. Anything closer to home? Well, I have to continue with the theme and pass on. I think this might have been something that maybe Patrick Snyder sent my way from RVA Wonk. You remember RVA Wonk from Twitter, now moved over to Mastodon. Caroline or Bueno, who writes here, I think it was probably Patrick who brought this to my attention, her message here. Okay, so now that I've had a moment to breathe, oh, that sounds great. I'd love to have a moment to breathe. Let me take a few minutes to dive into the study I just published about Russian involvement in, get my dramatic music ready for you, in the 2022 truck convoy in Canada. Yes, remember that. Well, I hadn't really thought to look for Russian influence and all of that, but it makes a certain amount of sense, once it's been suggested. Well, the study can be read in full here. There is a link, and I don't know, are we going to read it in full, or are we going to read her summary of it? Probably we'll stick to the Mastodon summary of it. I don't know how long the entry in full is, nor do I know if it's actually all, in fact, available. The abstract is here, and then a link to the PDF. But why don't we read her Mastodon toot summary of what she's talking about. By the way, where's it published? The Journal of Intelligence, Conflict, and Warfare. It's a rather specific journal. The title of the piece, again, just recently published, Russia's Role in the Far-Right Truck Convoy, an analysis of Russian state media activity related to the 2022 Freedom Convoy. Again, our author, Caroline or Bueno here. So first, she says, it's important to understand that Russia's propaganda and disinformation ecosystem is made up of different parts that may appear independent but are really like machines in an assembly line. Interesting, because we work the same way very often here in the United States. The interlocking directorates of various politically backed and politically motivated nonprofit groups. This was something that actually was practiced and perfected by the Newt Gingrich machine. You all remember when they used to refer to Newt Incorporated? I think you do, right? And this was a not dissimilar structure to what the Russians are using at the moment, but the Russians using it slightly differently. Anyway, they work together, she says, to manufacture, launder, tailor, and disseminate content. This assembly line includes overt state-funded propaganda, as well as media figures, proxy websites, fake social media personas, and more. It is illustrated with this screen grab slide of sorts explaining all this. For instance, there's the official government communications like Kremlin or ministry statements, something from the government. There's also state-funded global messaging. That is to say, state-funded foreign-facing media, RT, etc., state-funded domestic-facing media, the newspapers there in Russia, foreign-based Russian state-funded media, and I guess that's where RT would fit in, international Russian socio-cultural institutions. There's cultivation of proxy sources when Russia-aligned outlets with global reach are involved, local language-specific outlets, witting proliferators of Russian narratives, etc. There's weaponization of social media, of course, we all have been coming to understand, and cyber-enabled disinformation, hack and release, site capture, cloned websites, forgeries, etc., etc. All these various tools at their disposal. Caroline goes on to say, in this study, I focused on three main pillars of that ecosystem: overt Russian state-funded propaganda, RT. She gives the examples. I should have let her do it. Proxy sites connected to Russian intelligence like Southfront and Global Research, which allows some degree of plausible deniability on the surface. There's social media, in this case, Telegram groups that were set up for the truck convoy, but which later became repositories for Russian propaganda. I used a mix of OSINT, O-S-I-N-T, tools, open source intelligence, and techniques, including GDELT, which I don't know what that is or what it stands for, but perhaps you do. The first major finding is that Russian-funded propaganda outlet RT produced a higher volume of television coverage focused on the truck convoy than any other international media outlet. And why would they? It was happening in Canada. What's the interest, right? In fact, RT produced more convoy coverage than nearly all other international media outlets combined. That is interesting. Does RVA, or rather RVA, that's her, RVA Wong. But does RT operate in Canada? Do they have an RT Canada? Or is it just the United States-based channel that, can be distributed in Canada through various means? Or do they have that makes a difference to me. It would be harder to explain why U.S.-based RT would spend so much time on the Canadian convoy unless this were true. Russian-funded propaganda outlet RT, shown below in a chart of coverage in orange, was also the first international media outlet to mention the truck convoy on air. And as you can see, the peak volume far outpaced any other media outlet. RT's early dominance is strategically important because it may have provided an opportunity for RT to set the tone for subsequent international media coverage. Given that RT's tone is whatever aligns with Russian state interests, this is significant. Another notable trend, when RT's coverage drops off, Fox News' coverage starts to sharply increase, almost like the two outlets are in a symbiotic relationship. We know from previous reports that RT takes cues from Fox News, and this may be further evidence of such a relationship, whether it happens in the opposite direction or not. In the associated word clouds, those tools, notable themes include the prominent use of keywords like NATO and Ukraine by RT, which disappeared once RT's coverage was removed from the input. Similarly, keyword Nazi only appeared when RT's coverage was included. To me, this suggests an interesting intermingling of Freedom Convoy coverage and coverage related to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which was happening at the same time, or I guess we should say continuing at the same time. Perhaps the convoy was used as a distraction. I also looked at RT's online coverage of the truck convoy. I found that RT.com published 250 plus articles about the truck convoy and the linguistic patterns, repetitive uses of specific words and phrases, were suggestive of international language guidance, which is a tactic RT is known to use. The tone of the coverage was sympathetic towards convoy organizers and participants, portraying them as victims of a, quote, tyrannical government. I also looked at convoy coverage on Russian proxy sites linked to Russian intel agencies, and you can see the article for more information on them. Those sites occupy an intermediate role between the pillars of the ecosystem, with clear links to Russia and those that are meant to be fully deniable. Way behind on using our outro music here. But specifically, I looked at Global Research and Southfront, both of which produced ongoing coverage of the convoy that often included disinformation and inflammatory rhetoric, plus repeated calls for Trudeau to step down. I also looked at Telegram channels, some with tens of thousands of members, that were initially set up as truck convoy channels, but I found that over time, a network of them basically became repositories for Russian propaganda, including Kremlin press releases and Russian language content. What would that be doing in there? As I noted in the paper, many of the prominent conspiracy theories that circulated in these Telegram channels, including accusations about Canada supporting Nazis in Ukraine, are aligned with Russia's justification for invading Ukraine. Tactically, the strategies seen in these truck convoy / Russian propaganda channels, multilingual posting, that's not going to work for Canadian truckers, generally speaking. Repurposing the channels, cross-platform coordination, etc. They've all been previously associated with influence campaigns. So there's alignment with content and tactics. There's a lot more. This thread goes on for some time, not that much longer. Probably could have started earlier with it, but a very interesting one. We'll include it, of course, in the roundup. I think we're done updating you on other things to worry about Russia for the moment.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, so for the moment, of course, back to a more coherent view of national and international politics as Justice Putnam takes over for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. He'll, of course, have his own look back at the situation surrounding the State of the Union, plus his usual roundup from around the country and around the world. We'll see you tomorrow.